Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for joining in. Justin is head of SAP Startup Studio, Industry and Product Leadership, SAP Labs India. He's a tech marketer who believes in using marketing as a tool to drive value, innovation, and transformation. As part of the managing director's office at SAP Labs India, he heads SAP Startup Studio, the in-house startup accelerator, along with the product leadership charter at SAP Labs India, aimed at creating the next generation of product managers, leaders from India. He also leads the Industry Initiatives Charter, which involves interfacing with key industry and government agencies to drive strategic thought leadership for SAP in India. Welcome, Justin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Rishabh. Looking forward to the conversation.
Right, Justin, before we get started and deep dive into the program's mindset of how SAP has evolved into becoming an organization, fostering innovation, the different things that you're doing, just wanted to ask you a simple, open-ended question. What does innovation mean to you, Justin? How do you define innovation?
Sure, Rishabh. I think for me, innovation is essentially a way of life. So if you need progress, you need to keep doing things differently. And those interventions or those things which add value to your entire ecosystem of stakeholders, your end users, the entire ecosystem around is for me innovation. Yeah, as I was saying, for us, innovation is a way of life. If you need to progress, you need to keep doing things differently. And these different things are interventions which will add value to your entire ecosystem. For me, is the definition of innovation, right? And it is not if or not kind of a scenario. You need to keep doing things differently. You need to create value, all through the journey, and that is essentially what we believe as the whole idea or thesis of innovation that we drive here at SAP.
Good, and I think that's a great input, great statement itself that innovation is a way of life, right? It's not something that you can run away from. Probably it has become a part of the way we live. It's part of the way we work and the way we want to change things. With regards to the different inputs that we had gotten, Justin, from the Great Place to Innovate Awards from, we tried to put together and plot of the basic programs that you're running across this particular slide that all our participants can see. I'll quickly take a moment to cover what we intend to cover here is that the different programs that are being run at SAP, we have plotted it across the proximity of those programs to the core, to the business that SAP is running. Is it associated with core business, adjacent business, or a new business that they want to try on? And what is the scale of the impact of these programs, right? Is it incremental? Is it transformative and breakthrough? And as you see on your screens, the Reach the Reach Academia program that you have and the hackathons that you're running internally would lie on the core business, making an incremental impact along the business that's there. And the SAP Startup Studio, which is the engagement that you're running with startups, lying on the adjacent and new on the on a scale of transformative impact. And finally, Invent and Innovation Center Network as a part of your breakthrough in impact, creating a difference, right? One thing that I wanted to ask you, right, that one of the basic rules of smart investing is to never put all your eggs in one basket. How much of that do you feel is true with regards to the multi-pronged approach that you're running, right, with programs across startup innovation, internal innovation, academia innovation, and why the need of running all these innovation programs in parallel?
Absolutely, Rishabh. So I think what we have done fundamentally is exactly as you said, not putting all eggs in. Yeah, I would that. Yeah. So I think fundamentally, as you write, not putting all the eggs in the same basket has been the fundamental approach that we've taken. And if you look at it across all the interventions or programs that we have built over the years, the fundamental thesis is to have a very different flavor of innovation coming in, right? So, the collaborations with academia brings in a very different perspective of innovation, more from a research side of things, whereas collaborating with startups is essentially filling into the white spaces that we are looking primarily from the partner economy standpoint. And if you look at the kind of innovations, the internal innovations that we're driving through our annual innovation and venture challenges is essentially a direct add-on to our portfolio, right? So it's a varied mix which is coming in, where the academia side of things is looking into the larger horizon, three kind of innovations. The startup side of thing, or the partner side of the engagement, is looking more into filling some of those white spaces from a partner economy standpoint, and then essentially, the internal innovation is a direct fit into the larger line of business problem statements, and also, also trying to see how we can enhance the code, right? So these have been the approaches that we've been kind of taking up for the last few years. And I would say, out of the three, at least two of these programs, especially the startup engagement and the internal innovation engagements, have attained a certain level of maturity, because we've been running these engagements for the last 5 to 6 years, and we have had significant learning, whereas the academy engagement is something we have just initiated, right? But at the same time, a lot of learnings coming in. So that way, I would say the learning has been holistic so far. With and taking up a multi-prong approach has also given us different perspectives, right? How not just the internal ecosystem viewing things differently, but also we get a very strong perspective from the startups. How are they looking? How are they perceiving SAP? How are they looking at the innovations that SAP is building, and where they see a great potential of collaborating with SAP? Similarly, when it comes to academia, gaining perspectives around what are those net new things that we could visualize, with the support of deep research. So these are some key insights which are coming in, over the last few years, through this very, as you rightly pointed out, a multi-pronged approach. And that, for me, is the beauty of the engagement, right? Where you're kind of getting a very holistic point of view in terms of driving innovation, and gathering perspectives from multiple stakeholders.
Got it. And I think that's important for us to keep innovating across different programs. And like you mentioned, right, there have been a lot of learnings that you're able to further implement back into the system to ensure that you're constantly evolving and enhancing the process, right? So definitely you've not put all your eggs in a single basket, right? Just a follow-up question: is there a particular egg that you prefer, as in a particular program that you are preferring over other programs simply because it's the need of the hour as such, or there is equal emphasis across all your programs and projects?
I would say yes, there is definitely an equal emphasis across, all the programs. If I have to specifically call out, yes, obviously across the set of 4 or 5 interventions or engagements that we have, definitely the engagement that we carry out with, especially for our internal innovators, is a very key topic of focus for us, right? So it's called, the internal innovation topic is, where we have a very vibrant entrepreneurship program, right? That we've kind of initiated here in India, and of course there is also a global engagement to which we kind of loop it back into, right? So the fundamental thesis of this whole engagement is to ensure that we build in the next generation of entrepreneurs within SAP, right? People who can start thinking about what are the adjacent set of innovations around the portfolio, or what could be a potential, the next big enterprise tech idea, which can seamlessly leverage SAP capabilities as well, right? And then, obviously, at some point in time, spin off into a venture of its own. We've had, as you see on the slide, there are a couple of these examples already available. They are in their early stages, but they are certainly, as I was just saying, these are essentially very promising set of internal startups that we are kind of collaborating with. And essentially ideas which have come in, which have been nurtured by our internal innovation program, by employees who have been part of our annual innovation and venture challenges, who have spent a considerable amount of time in terms of, not just investing in these ideas, but also getting enabled on different topics around entrepreneurship, right, through a very systematic approach that we have taken up, where we also, as part of our larger entrepreneurship, and venture challenge engagement that we do every year, we also have a dedicated, close to 45 to 60-day engagement, where we call it a startup masterclass, where, our, participating entrepreneurs kind of go through those, very focused set of curriculum in terms of gathering not just perspectives around how to move their idea into an MVP, but also seeing how can they kind of really scale these ideas into scalable ventures which can later create traction, not just for themselves but for SAP as well, right? So SAP's right to win becomes a critical mandate there, and with that as one of the key intent, we kind of help some of these ideators to evolve into entrepreneurs through a set of focused interventions. And we have seen some significant success for this engagement, right? Since the inception of this model of thinking from 2017, we've already had four ventures which have come out of India, which have been funded by the Global Entrepreneurship Program, which itself is a huge, I would say, validation in terms of the ideas that we have invested and nurtured in. And some of these topics, some of these ventures today are a key, what do you say, a key extension to some of our key portfolios, right? Be it success factors or our sustainability portfolio. These are solutions which are kind of tagged along. There are joint engagements that we are carrying out with a set of customers. So that way, we're kind of creating value for these innovators, right? So the idea is not just to help them build, but the idea is to see how can we help them translate that build into a tangible product, and which can then be taken along with an SAP product along into the market and drive go to market very successfully. So I think that way, the internal innovation program, especially the entrepreneurship bit of the internal innovation program, is definitely, I would say, one of my favorites. And we're just looking at scaling it further, in the coming years as well.
Got it. And I think that's extremely important, right? Wherein you're not only providing them support or giving them a platform, setting a culture in the organization where individuals, members, the startups that you collaborate with, the academia that you collaborate with, not only are they empowered to think in the lines of innovation, but there's tangible results that you're able to drive, which further, adds more value, adds more ignition to drive innovation a lot more, right? When members, when startups, when academia, when students, they see that there are tangible results, commercial partnerships that are coming out of a particular program or through driving innovation with organizations, right? That would foster the spirit of innovation across the ecosystem at large. And I think that's extremely important from an organization standpoint as well. That while you're definitely putting your effort towards building that culture of innovation, there's also a lot of benefits that the startups, that the students, that the members can drive out of it, which is through these commercial partnerships. So a value add for startups, internal members, students would be to get these commercial partnerships that get driven from an organization, would just set up the center of innovation and drive that culture a lot more beautifully. Justin, the next thing that I have for you is that they say that begin with the end in mind, right? But more often than not, we are just so focused on the end, on the destination, on where we want to reach, that we struggle to even start. I'm pretty sure that most of our participants today, the different GCoEs that have joined us for this webinar, they would be interested to know that while you spoke highly about the multi-pronged approach, running different programs, and the stage at which all of these programs are today, all the GCoEs that have joined in, the participants that have joined it, would want to know how do we start today, right? Because we don't want to get affected by the end goal. But what would be your suggestions or inputs to someone who wants to build and run these programs from scratch today?
Yes, to that point in terms of how do we get started, right? So I think fundamentally, yes, there are multiple levels of alignment that we need to carry out, and I think one approach that I have always believed in, and something that I've really taken it to a lot of the programs that we have initiated here at SAP, is to always align. One, you need to have a clear focus in terms of alignment, in terms of the global strategy as well as the local strategy, right? Because globally there are a set of topics that as SAP or as any of the companies that you represent, you would have which of course all your programs should have ensure that
Yeah, just you were speaking of all the programs, the
kind of
mandate.
which kind of rolls up to this global mandate. That's one part of it, right? At the same time, what we also need to look into is the local strategy. So for me, when I look at the programs that we kind of drive out of India, we need to have a very strong imprint of what's relevant for the India market unit. For that, you need to ensure that you need to align not just with the R&D organization that you're part of. I mean, I'm part of SAP Labs India, which is the R&D organization, but at the same time, you need to have that openness of also engaging with your colleagues or stakeholders in the larger sales ecosystem, right? Because whatever you do here, be it internal innovation, which might be very much aligned to your larger product strategy, but you also need to have a clarity in terms of what is required in the local market, right? And what is that solution which is selling, or what is that specific innovation that the customers are looking out for or the partners are looking out for. So you need to somehow ensure that as part of your larger strategy or intervention plan for your programs, you really need to inculcate some of these thinking right from the beginning. Because if you start kind of ingraining some of these some of these strategies or some of these insights coming in from the key stakeholders, not just from the R&D, but also from the larger sales ecosystem of the organization. I believe that's when you really enable innovators to think of innovations which can scale up. Otherwise, it would just be an innovation for the build. I think fundamentally you should look at innovations which is not just for the build, but it's also an innovation for the go-to market, right? And I think that's the real kick that any developer would get. The moment they see that their product or their particular idea can now be converted into a tangible asset, which can then be tagged along with the portfolio, or it can be consumed as a extension by a partner or a customer, right? So that's the approach, that's the thinking that we need to kind of move into. And I think right from the beginning of our different interventions, different programs, this is the mindset that we have had. Even though we had the global strategy as the guiding force, at the same time we were grounded with the realities of what's happening in the local market unit, and ensure that we had a very holistic point of view. It was not just a point of view from the R&D, but the point of view also from the sales on what is the relevant things that we need to go after, and really focus in terms of getting some of these elements ingrained into our engagement. Just to call out one example is our internal innovation, the hackathon that we run, which is called Invent. We have a specific track on customer challenges, right? And these are challenges which come from a set of tier one, tier two, tier three customers in India across different categories. So we kind of across different verticals. So a couple of years we focused around CPG retail, because that is where the biggest bet in terms of investments and also in terms of big money focus was. Similarly, in the last year, we've been focusing around automotive a lot. In the coming year, we'll have a focus around pharma and life sciences, which, in fact, the entire ecosystem of pharma and life sciences customers in India kind of opening up a lot more into open innovation, right? And as you all know, there are multiple pharma companies now opening up their open innovation programs and all that, which is a marked indicator towards this mindset, right? So we want to ensure that we tap into some of these customers, understand from them what their real needs are, and then convert back into our internal, be it the internal or the external facing innovation programs, so that ultimately the end goal is to create customer delight and create tangible outcomes. If for an internal innovator, the moment they are able to build something for a customer, I think that is their biggest delight. That is where they see that their idea is now getting translated into something meaningful or something which can create real traction in the ecosystem. Similarly, for a startup, collaborating with a customer of SAP is where they see the real value, because you can give them mentorship, you can help them with the build, but only when they see that they are able to see SAP as a revenue channel. That's when the real value of the engagement comes out. And that is what we've been really focusing on. And it's been a very interesting journey, right? You can't hit the nail right from the beginning.
Yes, Justin, as you're saying,
Yeah.
you cannot
Yeah.
hit the.
It's essentially an engagement continuum, and you need to have some of these guiding principles right at the beginning, so that you really global focus as well as very much grounded to a local reality is very important for you, as you kind of run these engagements.
And I think that's a beautiful narrative and sum up of the entire proposition as a program, right? That and this goes out to all the participants that have joined us today, the GCO, is that in case you're wanting to build a particular program that drives innovation, regardless of whether it's an internal innovation startup, innovation academia, innovation, or all of them together in some or the other forms, right? There needs to be a clear narrative that needs to go out, that how it's going to help the different startups, right? What is the value add that you're providing to startups, which is the commercial partnerships with you as an organization are you able to generate? Then that would help startups generate more revenue. For the employees in the organization, it's basically getting a chance to scale their ideas to solve a particular problem which is directly affecting a customer, which can generate more revenue, thereby getting them that extra privilege, right? Which is that they are able to enhance their skill sets and their overall achievements for that matter. And same goes for academia, right? Where they are able to directly see the value add that they are able to get access to senior leadership, get mentored from the same. So I think for any program that we need to run today, there needs to be a very clear narrative as to what's in it for startups, what's in it for students, what's in it for employees, and you as an organization. And it needs to be a win-win situation for everyone for the program to become a successful program in the years to come. Right. We'll now move forward and look at the evolution of startup studio program that you're running at SAP, right? And if we have a look at the slide that we have presented basis the inputs that we got, right? From starting the SAP startup program in 2016 to having your first joint customer deal in 2018 to a total of 18 co-innovation done with startups by 2021. I'm certain you've made a lot of pivots, a lot of changes to the program to meet the changing times, right? What you started off as your focus area in 2016 probably is nowhere around as we're speaking about the program in 2022. What I wanted to ask you, which would help a lot of our participants today, is when you start off a particular program, there's a particular goal that you start off with. How do you make those changes, those pivots to bring the program where it is today? And what is the importance of continuously evaluating and pivoting innovative programs to meet the current times and the changing requirements per se?
No, absolutely, Rishabh. I think there is no one size fits all approach, right? I think most of the times when we look at innovation programs, be it internal, external facing, we kind of start off with this whole larger thought process that, okay, this is the end goal that we need. And this is where we are completely focusing on, right? What happens is that might be your perception of the reality of that day. It is not necessary that 3 years, 4 years down the line, four editions of engagement, you still have to stick on to that goal. That goal, your goalpost can change. So you need to have that flexibility because you need to be a little more, you need to be a lot more agile because your organizational, strategies can change. It is not, whatever has been decided today in 2022 will, you can never emphasize that 2024 it's going to be the same. There will be some changes which will happen. You will have to have that agility to make those changes, right? So while we started off Startup Studio in 2016, just taking the example of Startup Studio itself is in 2016, while we started off, the intent was to create a brand, association for SAP in the world of startups. Until then, in India, we didn't have a dedicated program. We want to ensure that we start collaborating with startups and understand how the whole ecosystem is and all of that. So primarily, when we started off in 2016, that was the whole, the larger, I would say, the intent was to see how can we get up close with the ecosystem, right? And then, of course, a little bit of product mentorship and some sort of guidance in terms of raising rounds of funding. This is what we were completely focused on. But when we started really looking into the the end impact, and this is something as a program team that we took on, right? It's a lean team still. It's just a couple of us who are working on the program. But I think in terms of the impact that we have created, we're quite proud about how those taking those pivots, taking those calculated risks at the right time have really helped us move into this direction. Specifically in 2017 is when we started thinking, how can we actually add value? The fundamental role with an SAP or any of the GCCs here would be to see how can they latch on to the larger customer ecosystem, right? End to end. And if you're not able to fulfill that aspiration, then whatever product mentorship, be it the best of the product leaders from your local leadership or from the global leadership coming on board, and you providing all sorts of support to help them build or integrate, is not going to add value unless you're able to fulfill their GTM aspirations, right? So with that as the focus, we started off from 2017, some of these conversations. So while we started off this engagement 2016, it was a very much a labs India specific engagement, which means it
Got
was
it.
more of an R&D driven engagement, very much confined to the four walls of the R&D ecosystem in India, and of course collaborating with some of the R&D colleagues in Germany and elsewhere. But what we took that call in 2017-18 was, we need to make it an ecosystem play, right? An ecosystem play, when I say it, it's not just the external piece of the ecosystem that you really need to collaborate with, which is great. You definitely need the support from the ecosystem think tanks, the investor ecosystem, and also the all the collaborators out there, to ensure that you're getting maximum support for your startups that are collaborating with you. But the fundamental ecosystem that you really need to fix is the internal one, where you need to ensure that it is a very well orchestrated engagement, where you have stakeholders from across the different functions of the organization in your local unit part of it. So what we did as a program was to really drive these conversations, and also give them that pitch that, by collaborating with us, this is the value that you are going to gain. So my proposition when we were having conversations with our colleagues from the field, which is essentially the sales unit, was, especially we were targeting the pre-sales, because pre-sales colleagues were the ones who are actually talking to customers in terms of innovation roadmaps, in terms of putting together joint go-to-market scenarios, and also they had the view in terms of what are those innovation white spaces. So you had to take that effort of kind of connecting back to them, selling the story that, what, there are a set of startups who can build a certain set of innovations on top of our technology platforms, and these would essentially be innovations which can really fit into the larger portfolio, right? Which can be sold as innovations complementary to the portfolio, right? So with that storytelling, we were able to kind of onboard a certain set of pre-sales colleagues. So when you do the pitch on day one, it's not mandatory that the entire group of the sales community is going to be is going to become your evangelists or ambassadors. It's a process, right? You
The
need to have
process.
conversations,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
need to show them multiple wins, right? So that's where, when we identified that we need to go after a couple of lighthouse wins, couple of projects which is of strategic importance for the market unit, specifically from an innovation led deal discovery kind of a engagement. That's where we went about and collaborated with a couple of pre-sales teams, where they were actually looking to position a net new product of SAP, where
Absolutely.
obviously there were elements of some of the new age technologies, right? Be it machine learning or AI. And we had some interesting startups who could build extensions on top of that platform. And we had to kind of create that set of POCs to build that trust with our sales colleagues first, and then they kind of championed it with the customer, and it happened to be one of the largest innovation led deals that year, right? And then once that one particular deal happened, there were a lot of messaging about it within the internal sales ecosystem. A lot of the pre-sales colleagues started warming up to us. And then, of course, followed by that was, we had the larger ecosystem of sales coming together, right? So then the field marketing colleagues came together. We had colleagues from customer success who came on board. We had the entire account teams coming together. So it was like, you know, I would say a trickle down effect, right? Bringing the entire ecosystem together.
Yep.
Once all these pieces came together, is when, now that we are very confident that whenever there is an innovation led problem statement where they feel SAP combined with one other niche innovation can, that is what the customer is looking out for. Startup Studio remains to be top of mind for the sales ecosystem in India. And now, currently, we're also working with a set of market units in the larger Asia Pacific and Japan region. And now, this year, we're kind of expanding globally as well, right? So that's how it is. You need to ensure that you start collaborations and conversations with the larger audience. It may not be your immediate network of collaborators, but you need to see what is what is the real value that you want to achieve out of this engagement. The real value for me as part of the startup engagement is to ensure that the startups are able to scale up, right? And they can only scale up if you open up a very cohesive go-to-market channel. And for that, you really need to engage with your sales ecosystem. If they are not convinced, if they will not become your storytellers to the larger customer community, then your stories would never be heard. So you really need to get them onto the fold, and I would say it's an engagement continuum, right? You can't crack that nut in a year or two, right? It's a continuous engagement. You need to have these conversations going, and then I think we are at a stage where I can say that a large amount of the pre-sales community in India, we are kind of connected quite well, and we are able to derive great value for them. Some of these conversations and the co-innovations that we have carried out, and the intent is to drive more. And I would say what we've done so far is just scratching the surface, but there is a positive validation in terms of the approach that we have taken up, because ultimately any sort of innovation program, if it is not benefiting your customer ecosystem, then I think that's not really adding value to anything that we do.
And absolutely, I think that's very much important from the standpoint of how any program could evolve, right? You need to have that buy-in, you need to have that support from all the business unit, from all the membership inside, and only then we'll be able to scale it much beyond. Like rightly said, we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more that's there for us to scale. There's so much more for startups, for innovation programs as such to scale. And it can only happen, and it can only happen faster as long as we have the support from all the leadership teams and internally, as long as we have a clear narrative, be it for the sales team, the marketing team, the team that's driving the all innovation programs in Children. Thank you so much, Justin, for covering that in great detail and great specifics. Final question was that something that you have already covered to a greater extent, which is you need to have that buy-in and support from the leadership, along with having the right innovators coming in. What would be the other barriers to innovation that you would like to call out with regards to right mindset and attitude for smart partnerships, right? Is it more to do with the culture that you are trying to imbibe? Or is there anything else that you want to cover with right mindset and attitude for smart partnerships as a barrier?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, yeah, there are multiple barriers, as you rightly pointed out, and I think this is similar to what Anshuman had also called out earlier. I think the fundamental thing that all of us need to get right is we need to ensure that there is a very definitive uh, business case associated with what we do, what we drive here, right? And having that alignment both from the local leadership as well as the global leadership. You need to have an executive sponsor for the initiatives that you drive. It could be a local leader championing it, or it could also be a global leader really buying into that vision, right? So that becomes extremely important aspect. And you also need to see how we are able to really um, uh, you know connect the dots, right? And it's just not about doing innovation for the sake of innovation. You really need to show them that this is what is the value that you can drive. If you're driving startup innovation, your clear talk track to them should be that, what, 5 years down the line, I would love to see maybe 5 of our startups moving into our larger partner engagement programs, right? So
Yeah.
that should be the larger pitch, that we are here as a program to help SAP build the next big partner economy, maybe with a focus around APJ as the geography of the intent, the area of geography of intervention, right? So I think these kind of a broad strategies should be in mind with definitive ROIs, right? Because you shouldn't just be doing because somebody wants you to do things. So I think that is a groundwork that as people facilitating innovation within the organization, we really need to do that. Also, while we do that, we need to ensure that we need to have that flexibility of doing a little bit of learning and unlearning, from the ecosystem, right? If you believe this is the only way in which you would be doing things, I think that's a very wrong way of kind of driving some of these interventions. You need to have that openness. There might be a intervention strategy which should have been adopted differently by a customer or a partner or even your competition, right? I think fundamentally you need to be open about adopting some of those practices. At the same time, also really looking into what is that one thing which will create value, value messaging for you as you take it to these stakeholders, right? So I think that alignment with this leadership becomes an extremely critical point of pointer for you to kind of drive it further. If you do not have it fixed right at the beginning, then I think whatever you do post that is an absolute failure.
Absolutely. Got
Obviously,
it.
second and third aspect is primarily around getting the right kind of collaborators, right? And the innovators, right? Because as I said, that whole focus of building the innovation ecosystem internally becomes an extremely critical aspect. And if you do not have stakeholders across the organization with you, because ultimately, if you look at it, even if it is an internal innovation use case, I'm just giving a classic example of the internal innovation use cases. If you do not have a very strong leverages or connects within some of these product engineering or product management leadership from a specific LOB, if you have an interesting idea coming in from your innovation or venture challenge, you want to productionize it or you want to eventually convert into a scrum team as part of this particular LOB, you can only do that if you have that connect already and you're able to create that value conversation, right? So that is very important. You need to ensure that you have a wider network of internal champions and collaborators, people with the right mindset, and people who have that openness to collaborate. And in some cases people may not be open to partnerships right at the beginning. You really need to articulate the value proposition to them that by doing so, this is what we can help you with, right? That could be this conversation, be it with regard to your driving your internal innovation, or it could be with regard to driving a research led conversation with an academia, or engaging a startup with an LOB, right? I think I've dealt with all the three flavors, and the conversations are slightly different, but ultimately you kind of create a very strong value proposition for that end user,
Got
and then the decisions are made, right? And then of course you need to ensure that you attract the right talent pool to innovate, be it the startup or be it the organization that you're trying to innovate with.
Got it. Thank you so much, Justin, for walking us through the different barriers that are there with regards to innovation and all the time that you have given us for the webinar today. It was really an indeed pleasure to host you and cover the different elements that are there. With that, we have come to an end for the overall webinar today. I would once again like to thank our speakers who took time out from their schedule. Anshuman Avasti from MBRDI and Justin Paul from SAP Labs, walking us through how innovation mandates are taking place across their organizations. What 90 minutes went by in a jiffy, and there's just so much more that we want to discuss. There's just so much more that we want to get an insight on. And that kind of lives up to what Justin said towards the end, right? That when it comes to innovation, we have just barely scratched the surface, and there's so much more that's there for all of us to imbibe, learn, and get better in the workplace that we are in. With that, we come to an end of the webinar today, which was hosted by Zinnov for the awards that we have, which is Great Place to Innovate. I hope that the entire webinar was helpful to all of you to gather enough practices, insights, way forward for the different innovation programs that you would want to run in your organizations. Post the end of this particular webinar, when we close the webinar, please expect an email from Prashant from Zinnov, where he'll be sharing the minutes of the meeting for today's webinar, along with the recording of the event. And if in case you have any questions, you would like to have a conversation, a dialogue, a discussion with our innovation SME, please do write to prashant@zinnov.com. All the details will be shared in the mail. Thank you so much once again for being a part of this webinar. I hope you have a great day ahead. Thanks so much for joining. Take care. Cheers.